A very good morning to all the respective dignitaries and the faculty members. I, Dr. Pratibha Pandey, Assistant Professor in the Department of Biotechnology, am here to welcome our honorable guest speaker, Dr. Muhammad Samiruddin Khan sir, to share his insightful lecture on pedagogy in our faculty development program. Presently, he is working as a director, academics and administration of 6 colleges under Sri Datta Institutions, Hyderabad. He has a vast experience in academics as well as in administrative work. Dr. Khan is also a strong motivational speaker, so I request you, sir, to kindly embrace this event with your informative session. So please kindly share your lecture, sir.
Very thankful to you for such a superlative kind of introduction. Yeah, it's a great privilege to be among all the learned and the seasoned academicians. And I'm very thankful to Rashmi ji for giving me this opportunity to be amongst all the learned faculty who are assembled here to enlighten each other. I have the same mundane kind of thoughts as an academician, how to make a student learn and how to make the learning more effective. So it's a dynamic situation nowadays where faculty feel more challenged about their teaching and learning, because somehow I feel that the faculty have become now omnipresent and omniscient, because with the help of technology, the faculty can be everywhere, anytime, any place, and there are advantages and disadvantages. Being available everywhere, anytime, is also getting subjected to those audiences also which we don't prefer. Even the parents are also judging the faculty about their ability to enlighten their wards and their sons and daughters. So in this pandemic situation, the teaching learning has transformed a lot. It has become more challenging. It has become more technology based, and even the faculty has undergone a lot of learning. And what earlier we used to propose about flipped classes and all, which were never heeded by the faculty, only few take up this challenge, has now become a new norm, and everybody is going for it. So it's a very good thing that because I've been proposing and preaching about flipped classes and modern pedagogy from the past 10 years, but I have seen very less kind of response from the faculty. But now, since it is the only option available, LMS and flipped classes and video lectures have become something which is a necessity now. So with this note, and also I would like to start this session with the sayings of a person who I admire and take as Dronacharya of academics, Dr. Deepak Pathak from IIT Bombay. 4 years back, I had met him in IIT campus, and I had been there only to see him and meet him and talk to him. And end of the session, I ran behind him and just told him that I'm here just because to meet him. And I asked a valid question to him about what does he think about a future teacher. So the answer was very wise and very much relevant to the current situation. He said that a future faculty should not just be deliverer of knowledge, he should be rather a facilitator or enabler of learning. So I start my session with this note, and I am very sure that with the kind of patience you can exhibit in this session, and the kind of curiosity you bring along with you, and the kind of questions you have with you, and your experience along with it, will definitely make us learn something about how throughout the session we can understand that the faculty's role has changed from deliverer of knowledge to facilitator of learning or enabler of learning. So this is what I want to start with. So I have prepared a presentation, though it's very exhaustive, and let me see how in a short span of 1 hour I can wind up this. So the title I have given is about modern pedagogy and ICT based learning. I'll be only touching tangentially about ICT-based learning because it's a new norm. Everybody has the understanding. Only I can correlate, how things can go along with the modern pedagogy. So I'll be dealing with the topics which are on the screen, as you see, introduction to Bloom's taxonomy, why, what, and how, and learning objectives, why, what, and how, and we'll discuss about active learning, under which we'll discuss about think, pair, and share, or some of you call it as TPS, and we'll talk about peer instructions. Then we'll go for maybe in the afternoon session, the second session, sorry, I can go for alignment of assignments and then flip classes, and we'll conclude. So let us start with the kind of experience every faculty has in his lifetime, that we have been seeing how faculty are so excited about their teaching. They refer n number of textbooks, they refer research papers, they prepare a very good, beautiful presentation, and they have some objects to display in the classroom. So that shows how much excited a teacher is with his own preparations. And after the class, we just feel ecstasy, and if the class is very good and productive, the kind of satisfaction we gain, I think everybody can share that with me. We feel like God, and it's so good that we were able to deliver some knowledge to the students. And the sad face of it is that when the examination results are declared, we see that our excitement of taking classes and the kind of preparations we made and the kind of happiness we had is reduced to zero, because we find that the results are 20% or 30%, and we are in a panicky state because we need to answer the head of the department, we need to answer the principal, we need to answer the director, we need to answer the management. So we then start interacting with the students, asking them how things went wrong, and the students say that most of the questions were out of the syllabus. So this is how basically we face situations and problems. And we are, the situation is very chaotic. Like, what does it mean by questions were out of the syllabus? What does it mean that the students were unable to solve the problem or unable to understand the question? So this is where the mismatching happens. And my endeavor today is to see that, how we can match these expectations of the teacher with the student. So I would not directly go with the Bloom's taxonomy. Rather, I would start with an example just to understand where exactly Bloom's taxonomy fits. So what basically a teacher wants a student to learn? We have a content or a set of instructions, lectures. We want to hone the abilities and skills of the students, and we want to hone the behavior in terms of understanding the or analyzing the problems and solving the problems. So this is what, as a teacher, we expect from the students. So let us take an example. A typical classroom where we have a course called geometry, and let us say the faculty is going to teach Pythagoras theorem to secondary school students. I took this example because I thought that everybody will understand it irrespective of the kind of branch they are, whether they're from science, humanities, or engineering, because everybody has gone through this Pythagoras theorem class. And as you see, what does the teacher do? The teacher has taught a Pythagoras theorem, and he explained the Pythagoras theorem. He showed how to identify the hypotenuse, and he also did some problem solving using multiple examples of right angle triangle. Now, what happens after the class is that the teacher has actually explained the Pythagoras theorem, and teacher explained which side is the hypotenuse, and teacher has solved the problems on Pythagoras theorem. Now, what do we expect the student has done? Students have studied the formula of Pythagoras theorem. They have practiced identification of the hypotenuse of a given right angle triangle. and they have solved some problems on the Pythagoras theorem by using similar examples what the faculty has taken up in the classroom. Now let us see the examination scenario. During the examinations, the students, they are tensed up and they are very panicky reading the question paper, and the same thing happens. The question that was asked on Pythagoras theorem was something which was out of the cognizance of the students. So it was like, on a sunny day, a 30-meter tree cast a shadow. If the distance between tips of the tree and the shadow is 35 meters, find out how long is the shadow. Now, what are students supposed to do? They need to correlate the given dimension to the sides of a right angle triangle and then find the length of the shadow. But it did not happen. The exam results were that most students were not able to solve this problem. And what went wrong actually? Most students were not able to solve this problem. Why? The students say that the question was out of syllabus. We have not done such problems in the classroom earlier. And the instructor says that it was very simple. They could have just applied whatever they have learned in the class and the problem would have been solved. So what do we see here? Just think for a while what went wrong actually. I would like to have some interactions in between, because while preparing the presentation, I found that somewhere I may be very dry, and thank God the session is in the morning. So at least the time will be of advantage to me where everybody is fresh. So I would like to question the August gathering and the learned faculties that what exactly would have went wrong. If there is time for an interaction, I'll wait for some time. Otherwise, I can proceed ahead. So if you see the perspective of the teacher and the perspective of the student, I find that both are right. The teacher has done his job. The teacher has explained them what is a Pythagoras theorem. The teacher has explained what is a hypotenuse. The teacher has solved some problems based upon it. And the teacher says, I have done my job. And the student also has justified about his preparation, that whatever notes was given by the faculty, whatever examples were solved by the faculty, what learning went in the student was quite justified, that he has learned whatever has been taught by the teacher. He has gone through the notes given by the teacher. He has solved similar examples. So what I see here is that there is a mismatch between the teacher's expectations and the student's level of learning. Now, why did this mismatch happen, and how to match these expectations of the teachers and the students? So what I see here is that the solution is teacher can ask two questions, and these two questions he can ask back and forth. That is, what are my goals as a teacher, and what learning outcomes do I want students to take away from the day's class. So we have something called takeaway, very frequently used in seminars, corporate seminars. So it's basically that learning outcome, the takeaway which you expect from the student. Now here, what we do here is we need to match the goals of the teacher with the learning outcomes. And this idea is formalized by the concept called learning objectives. So in order to match the expectations of the teachers with the level of learning the students have, we need to define something called learning objectives. And learning objectives are basically goal statements. Please concentrate on my words. Learning objectives are goal statements which include specific, measurable performance outcome of learner. So these goal statements should be specific, they should be measurable, and it should indicate the performance outcome of a learner. So basically in our life, we have set objectives so as to focus our attention and our efforts. And these efforts and focus what we have to set for achieving some objectives in our life and to accomplish the same objectives are also applicable in education also. So objectives basically indicate what we want students to learn. So explicit formulation of how students are expected to be changed by the educative process is what the teacher has to, always think upon. Now, how to construct learning objectives? I have lot of time uh, talk to the faculties who generally do not understand learning objectives so fast. Is that when you go to the classroom and when you have an agenda with you, like today I'll be dealing with these topics. You have a structure of the lecture with you, and you have a plan that today I will make the student describe, or today I'll make the student able to draw. Today I'll make the student able to define. Today I'll make the student able to compare. So this is what basically is the agenda you carry to the classroom. And if you zero into the specifics of your agenda, that becomes the learning objective. So learning objective is not a rocket science or something. It is basically what you want your students to learn out of your lecture that you are conducting for a class. That basically is called the learning objectives. You might have come across learning objectives, you might have read it, you might have implemented it, but today we'll have an explicit, understanding about what kind of focus and attention we need to give to learning objectives so that we achieve desirable results in terms of the learning of students. So there are some things which you need to understand, and you should not do it, or there are some things which you need to be. So there is a statement like understand linear equations, visualize working of IC engine, know how logic gates work. So understand cannot be a learning objective. See, learning objectives are basically verbs, and understand cannot be a learning objective because you cannot measure understanding of a student. Understanding may be stating the theorem, understanding may be solving a problem. So you cannot basically, measure the kind of understanding or level of understanding a student has. It cannot be a measurable entity. And visualize working of IC engine. Visualize cannot be a learning objective because a faculty cannot measure the visualization of a student. A student can visualize infinity. So you cannot measure, or you cannot put a boundary for the visualization limit of a student. And no is something, it's a bad kind of learning objective which many faculty use. So no cannot be a learning object because what do you mean by no? It's a problematic word, what one knows unless they demonstrate it. So unless a student demonstrate it, you cannot know how much of the knowledge he has assimilated. So you need to be very sure that your learning objectives are specific and measurable, and also instead you have to take up some verbs which are called action verbs. That is like identify, list, describe, explain, solve, analyze, design, compare. These are the verbs which are best represented as learning objectives. Now, many of the faculty have a question like, what is the difference between a syllabus and learning objectives? So basically, syllabus is a set of bullets. Basically the ideas and concepts are similar in both the columns which are mentioned here. So let us say today's class is from a topic on section 2.3 of your textbook, and the content of the syllabus is that they are linear equations, slope, y-intercept, simultaneous equations, graphs, methods of solutions. And learning objectives are that give an example of linear equations in two variables, interpret the meaning of m and b in y equals to mx plus b, solve graphically the equations given by x plus y is equal to 2, x minus y equals to 4. So you see three columns, and the first column is your section of a page on a textbook, and second column is the content from syllabus, and third is learning objective. If you see the last two columns, the ideas and concepts are same, but if you see more closely, syllabus is a set of bullets, whereas learning objects are more specific. They are more measurable. They are more performance outcome based. So this is what is the difference between a syllabus and learning objectives. So what is the role of a teacher? If we state it very simply, when we teach, we want our students to learn. That's very as simple as that. And we want them to learn as a result of our teaching. That are basically our objectives. So if you see this diagram, teaching learning process is a systematic process. You have a teaching plan, and based upon the teaching plan, students' learning happens. And after the learning happens, you assess the learning among the students. That gives you the kind of understanding that whether your objectives which you have set for the class have been accomplished or not. And if it's not accomplished, to what level? And what is the next plan to do if the objectives are not accomplished? Now, there are hierarchies of cognitive levels in learning objectives. So basically, these learning objectives we form across a scientist by name Bloom. And how do we form these learning objectives is the next question. So I was, of the view that I should start the class with Bloom's taxonomy, but I think now is the time where I can introduce Bloom's taxonomy. So here, what we have in revised Bloom's taxonomy is that it's a taxonomy of cognitive levels. Cognitive levels in sense the levels of cognitive thinking. Essentially, it is a set of 6 levels, and these are the cognitive levels in which various learning objectives are constructed. So it's very plain kind of objectives or the levels which I'm going to exhibit now. If you just see here, as you all know, taxonomy means classification. So here we are not dealing with botany or zoology to classify mammals and flowers and trees. We are basically classifying here the 6 cognitive levels of complexity. And it was introduced by Bloom, and later it was revised by Anderson and Rathwell. And this is what revised Bloom's taxonomy is all about. It has 6 levels. It starts from remembering, it's the basic cognitive level of thinking, and then goes with understanding, then applying, then analyzing, and then finally creating. So what we see here is that every level, if you cross, so if you see, we start with remembering. That is basically we recall something from our long-term memory, and then we go to understanding, where we grasp the meaning of whatever we have, stored in the memory, and we try to define it in our own manner. And then whatever we have in our long-term memory, what we understand out of it, we apply it, and then we go to the next level where we analyze the whole picture by dividing into smaller parts, and then we are able to compare, and then finally we go to a stage where we are able to design, and we make students create a new product or a new point of view. So they would be able to assemble, construct, create, design, and develop, formulate, write, or invent. So every level you see is complex than the previous level, and every level subsumes the previous level. So this is what basically is Bloom's taxonomy, and the students begin basically from the lowest level, that is remembering, and they go further progressing to the higher levels, and each of these are mapped with measurable outcomes. So if you can see the previous picture, I have even put the verbs which are nothing but cognitive processes, or we can say specific measurable performance outcome action verbs. So the revised framework is 2-dimensional basically, and I'm talking about the newer model, where it represents 2 basic dimensions. One is the cognitive process, and the other is knowledge. So let me take an example. The student will learn to distinguish among confederal, federal, and unitary systems of government. Now, this is a kind of a learning objective which is set by a faculty like me, and now I need to analyze that whether this learning objective is valid or authentic. Yes, it's of course, because I'm talking about distinguish. It is not understand, visualize, or know. I'm not entering into the domain of forbidden verbs. Distinguish is a legal learning objective, It's a legal action verb. Distinguish, differentiate, these are the legal verbs which can be used. So I want the student to distinguish among different types of governments. So here there are two parts. One is distinguish is basically representing the cognitive process, and information about or knowledge about confederal, federal, and unitary systems of government is what represents the knowledge dimension. So there are two dimensions in this learning objective. One is the uh, learning objective, that is distinguish, which is nothing but an action verb, or you can say it as a cognitive process. And the other part of the learning objective is the noun part, that is information about the government, which also is represented as knowledge. So as you all know, there are four types of knowledge. If we categorize knowledge: factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, and metacognitive knowledge. So if you can construct a table like this, you can see that this particular learning objective, the student will learn to distinguish. Distinguish basically falls in the category of analyze. That is the fourth level in the revised Bloom's taxonomy. And knowledge about the government system comes in the conceptual knowledge category. And you can see that this analyze learning level will intersect with the conceptual knowledge column here, and that is where student will be able to analyze and have the knowledge about the governments. So student will be able to differentiate between let's say rational numbers and irrational numbers. The second kind of objective I have fixed. Now if you see this, the student will learn to differentiate between rational numbers and irrational numbers. I think every faculty whose background is science can easily understand what is the meaning of rational numbers and irrational numbers. So what I mean to say here is that how do we basically look at this particular learning objective. So the action verb here is differentiate, which is basically the cognitive process, and which is one of the dimension of the learning objective. And the second thing is knowledge about the rational numbers and irrational numbers. So when you classify this particular learning objective as what the student will be able to do and what kind of knowledge they will acquire, you can see that the number system falls in factual knowledge, and differentiate will occur in the lowest level of cognitive levels, that is remember. So once a teacher, a faculty categorizes his learning objectives in this manner, in this framework, then preparing for the lecture becomes easier. The preparing for the instructions to the students becomes easier. There is third learning objective I've taken up, which is student will learn the names of the major works of American and British novelists. So these are the kind of learning objectives the teacher has to set. And if you see the taxonomy table and assessment, how should we now link these learning objectives with the assessment? Like how should we know that once the learning objective is drafted by a faculty, once the learning objective has been devised by a faculty, and the lecture related to that learning objective has been delivered, now the question comes, how much of the assimilation has happened in the classroom? And there's a major kind of attainment we need to have as a faculty. So how do we do that? What we are doing here is, let us say the first learning objective was that student will learn to distinguish among several types of governments like confederal, federal, and unitary systems of government. So how do I assess whether the student has understood whatever I have taught in the classroom? How do I assess that the assimilation has gone as per my expectations? Whether my expectations has matched with the learnings of the students. So what I find here is that I can ask a question like by giving an example of a country where a particular government is being run. So I can ask questions on the basis of that example, that what system of government is this? So when I give the example of a country to the student should try to understand what system of government is this, because he's having knowledge about now federal, confederal, and unitary governments. So he will be able to understand the functioning of the government and categorize whether it's federal or confederal or unitary. Then I have another question for the student. How do you know that it is the type of government system you say it is? Then he starts justifying it, that I have proposed that the country is running federal government on the basis of these parameters. Then finally, I would ask a question to the student that what changes would need to be made to transform the country system into other two systems. Now here comes the knowledge of the student about the other two governments, and he now starts correlating. He then finds out then what is common among all the three and how to switch from one government to the other government. So this gives a clear picture to the faculty whether the assimilation has been possible as per the expectations of the teacher or not. Now, this kind of learning objectives set by the faculty as per the different cognitive levels of the revised Bloom's taxonomy will match the expectations of a student and a teacher, and we can expect for the desired results. If the attention and focus is not given to these learning objectives, then the results can be undesirable. So I hope you understood the concept of learning objectives and Bloom's taxonomy. Do you have any questions, or shall I go ahead? So let us go back to the place where we had switched to Bloom's taxonomy. As I said, learning objectives are basically goal statements which are specific, measurable, and performance outcome based. And these are the do's and don'ts I spoke about. So the question is whether this all learning objectives are at the same level. This state, calculate, apply. Let us reflect for a while here, and you can think and write. Let us examine a set of learning objectives. Now here I'd like to take a scenario where a faculty had discussed about Euclidean formula, and the faculty, what he had done was he has drawn the diagram to explain the meaning of Euclidean distance between 2 points, describe the formula for Euclidean distance between 2 points, and applied formula to calculate Euclidean distance between a similar pair of points like x1, y1, x2, y2. Now again the same thing happened. Students told that the question was out of syllabus, because I would like to again put across a question also to you. I can share desktop. So if you see this example here, I have stated a set of learning objectives based upon an example on Euclidean distance formula. A faculty was able to set the learning objectives, like student will be able to state the Euclidean distance formula in 2-dimensional space. Student will be able to calculate the distance between 2 points. There is x and y coordinates. The student will be able to apply distance formula to solve a real life problem involving multiple points. Now my question to all of you is whether these 3 learning objectives are of the same level or not. So when you reflect, I think you may got the answer. See, whenever we set the learning objectives for our class, always remember that we need to start with the sentence, the student will be able to, because learning objectives are more student-centric, not learner-centric. So in that way, the student will be able to state the Euclidean distance formula in two-dimensional space is one of the learning objective. Student will be able to calculate the distance between 2 points. Student will be able to apply distance formula to solve a real life problem. These are the 3 learning objectives, and they do not fall in the same category or the same levels. So if you see what basically they mean, the first learning objective is related with the recall level, that is the first level, remember level. So then the student will be able to state means he will be remembering or he will be recalling from the long-term memory the Euclidean distance formula. And the student will be able to calculate. Calculate here falls in the apply level, where the student will not only recall, he will understand, and then he will apply the formula. And the student will be able to apply distance formula to solve a real life problem. Here if you see, the example is a helicopter flies from a military base camp in a northward direction for 5 kilometers, then turns eastward and flies for 7 kilometers. It then flies in a southwest direction for 2 kilometers. How far is it from its starting point? Now this question may confuse the students if it was not dealt by the faculty using the learning objective, like student will be able to apply distance formula to solve a real life problem involving multiple points. So if this particular learning objective was not set by the faculty, then I think the same scenario would have been occurring, where the student would come back to you and say that, no, I could not understand the problem and I could not solve it because I find that the question was out of syllabus. But if you see the question very carefully, here the student need to first analyze the problem. So he has to break the problem in parts and has to understand the problem, and then he can apply the Euclidean distance formula. So this is another kind of activity I had planned, where I would like the faculty attending this webinar to find out the answer for this. The student will be able to state the Euclidean distance formula in two-dimensional space, calculate the distance between 2 points, apply distance formula to solve a real life problem. I have given 3 different learning objectives, and I want the faculty to let me know whether all the learning objectives fall in the same level, or one is less than the other or equal to the other. So which is the correct answer? So if you see here, A is recall, B is apply, and C is analyze and apply. So you can see that B subsumes A and C subsumes B and A both. So the answer is A is less than B is less than C. These are the various action verbs you need to understand and remember. And many of the faculties, what basically they do is, whenever they are preparing a lesson plan, and in the lesson plan, when they are deriving learning objectives for each topic, they should always remember that each topic in their syllabus or unit has to have 2 learning objectives, one of lower order and the other of higher order of learning. So when you prepare your lesson plan and you plan for delivering a lecture on topics, each topic should have 2 learning objectives, one of higher order level and the other of low order level. And this kind of handy set of verbs in front of you will enable you for easier preparation of learning objectives. So now I would like to move on to the third chapter of my webinar. As I had shown the slide in the beginning, it's basically related with active learning, and as the word itself says what exactly active learning is. To understand that, let us understand this scenario. As I said in the beginning, that your faculty will spend a lot of time in preparing lectures, so that the class goes very smoothly. He prepares for animations, demos, and videos. And a normal practice of a faculty is that he always pauses in between to ask the students if they have understood the material. And unless he gets the response from the students properly, the satisfaction level doesn't move on. So students can be even interrupted in between to ask whether they have any doubts in the class. And basically, as a faculty, I never hesitate to, answer their questions. I would love the students to ask me questions, because that way I can assess the kind of curiosity I have generated in them, whether they have followed the topics or not. And finally, when the students answer my questions, I feel that to some level I have been successful in my lecture. But always we don't find this positive scenario in the classroom. Hardly 3 or 4 students answer the questions asked by a faculty, and only the cream of the class is very much active. You don't find the other section of the class very actively asking you questions. So what does it mean? Does it mean that these kind of excitement what I have in taking the class? Today also I'm very excited to deliver my webinar, because it's not that I've done very much hard work, because these are the things which I've been preaching on all these years. But I had a kind of excitement to present the pedagogy in front of the new audience. But I don't know whether the audience is as excited as me, because it's what happens with the teacher. The teacher is always excited if he has or she has prepared very well, but he's not very much sure whether the audience, that is the students, are as excited as the teacher, and whether the learning has happened as good as the teacher's preparation. So let us examine some empirical results. Let us take a scenario where there is one group where the faculty is teaching the students very fluently. He has a video, and he is very upright. He maintains eye contact, and the other group, if you see, has a faculty which is disfluent. He speaks haltingly, and he often sees notes and then teaches the students. He slouches, has a poor body language. So there are 2 different scenarios presented in front of you. These are basically the experiments which have been done in real time, and the empirical results were taken out of it. So how do you measure the performance of these 2 scenarios? So after the test was conducted, post lecture, the results were shocking. The level of learning that went in both the classes was almost same. One can disbelieve it, because coming from the conventional model of teaching, I would always say that the faculty who was very fluent, who never saw the notes to teach, and had a very confident about his preparation, and had a eye contact with the student, will definitely bear good results than the faculty who was not confident, was slouching, had a poor body language that represented that he has not prepared well. But the results are astounding, and it says that the level of learning was same. So we basically have 2 levels of learning. One is perceived learning and actual learning. Perceived learning is something which we feel I have learned in the class. So basically what we say is that what I understand I have learned in the class is called perceived learning, whereas the kind of knowledge I demonstrate in a test or exam is the actual learning. So it is not the quality of lecture that leads to better learning. So we always feel that better preparation, referring a lot of books, very good presentation, referring a lot of research papers, and going to the class confidently in a well-organized way will lead to better learning. I defy that, because of the empirical values I have with me, that it's no more a misconception that only well-organized lectures will lead to better learning. This is not something which is a reality. So if you just take a series of teaching learning scenarios here, you can see teacher basically lectures on a topic for 1 hour, student will listen. If you take the second scenario, teacher lectures every 20 minutes, he pauses and asks, did you understand? Some students nod and teacher again resumes the lecture. Then you have a scenario where teacher lectures every 20 minutes, she pauses and asks, do you have any doubts? 3 students raise their hands, teacher resumes the lecture. Then you have teacher lecturing for 20 minutes. She will ask students to clarify their notes with each other, to discuss among each other about the notes she has given, whether they have copied all the points or not, or they have missed something. Each student turns to the neighbor and discusses notes. Then the next scenario is that a teacher will lecture on a topic for 20 minutes. She then poses a real life application problem. Like for example, I am teaching array and in C language or C++, I'll discuss about arrays for 20 minutes, and I'll ask the students to write a problem, to solve a problem, to sort the elements of the array in the ascending order or descending order. So student will discuss in groups of 3 to 4. They'll devise a solution for 20 minutes, and teacher wraps up by conducting a discussion on challenging points and summarizes the solution. So once the student comes with a solution, the teacher will then display or demonstrate the solution of his own or her own, so that the students can compare how right or wrong they are. Then the last scenario here is that the teacher will start a class with a 2-group debate on pros and cons of 2 methods. So let us say the teacher this time has used arrays and linked lists for implementing a stack. And now the teacher will put this for discussion by creating 2 groups in the class. One group will debate upon how arrays are good to implement a stack, and the other group will be given the topic of how linked lists can be better in implementing stack. So now the debate starts, and the students will start talking about the pros and cons for another 20 minutes. Teacher summarizes which is better method, because arrays, can be used if you want to randomly pick up a element from it, and linked list can be used for that kind of stack where you have to only remove the elements from the top. So this is what the faculty will demonstrate at the end. And if you can see the entire scenario here, first thing is where the teacher only speaks for 1 hour and student is listening. So that the first scenario represents a teacher-centric kind of class where the student's participation is very low. But when you proceed further, you can see that the teacher is limiting herself or himself only to 20 minutes. And slowly there is a kind of interaction between the students and the teacher. And then you go to the third one, you see that there are 3 students participating slowly. And then when you go to the fourth scenario, then you see that the entire class is discussing about the notes. When you go to the fifth scenario, you can see that all the students are making a group of 3 to 4 and discussing about the solution to a problem posed by the faculty. And when you come finally to the last scenario, so what we see here is that the entire class is involved, entire class is participating, entire class is, reflecting. So what we see here is a larger participation. And that's what I mean to say, active learning is basically engaging the students to the content for a longer period of time. So as I said in my discussion earlier, that a future teacher should be enabler of learning or facilitator of learning rather than a deliverer of knowledge. And you can see very clearly here that, the role of a teacher is getting diminished, it's getting reduced from continuous transmission of lecture. Here, the teacher has turned out to be or transformed to be a facilitator, where he's a moderator or she's a moderator or acting like a consultant to go across the groups and find out what discussions are going on among the students group and where the students are right and where the students are wrong. So this is the benefit of active learning. So what changed the scenario actually, from the conventional to the current pedagogy? So students are doing on their own. Students are doing more meaningful activities within the class. They are writing, they are discussing, they are solving the problems. They are more engaged with the content, and they are more collaborative because they are collaborating with their neighbors to remove their misconceptions. and they're discussing with their neighbors to come out with better solutions on the content they have with each other. And reflection is more what you see when they are learning. And then see the teacher. The teacher has to make less talking, and the teacher should be more as a facilitator in the class, and the teacher has more thought out of the class, because the teacher is now more engaged in what kind of activities to plan for active learning, what kind of activities to design, so that the collaboration, the discussion, the reflection should increase in the classroom. So this active learning leads to a better assimilation or better learning among the students. All the research shows that active learning has yielded much better results than the conventional type of chalk and talk kind of classrooms. So what are the requirement of active learning strategies? You need to understand that instructor should create carefully designed activities that require students to talk, write, reflect, and express their thinking. Majority of the students should go beyond listening and beyond copying of notes and beyond execution of prescribed procedures. It should be explicitly based on theories of learning, that there should not be too much of cognitive load on the student, and the student should attain that proximal learning. So many informal strategies may have the goal of engaging students, but to be termed as active learning, they need to meet the above requirements what I have mentioned. What are the key elements of active learning strategies? Students engage in a problem-solving activities. As I have said, problems posed are in variety of contexts. Often real-time problems are discussed. Specific student ideas are elicited and addressed. Students are asked to figure out things by themselves. Students are asked to express their reasoning explicitly. Students will work with their neighbors or groups or collaboratively, and students will receive rapid feedback of their work, because if they attend a test or an exam, they need to wait till the results are declared. But in active learning, the feedback is immediate, because the faculty will be around them, and the faculty will be interacting with them, and the faculty will be letting them know where they are right and where they are wrong. So qualitative reasoning and conceptual thinking are emphasized in this active learning. Now, how do we implement active learning? I have being from computer science background, I have taken the programming example. So you can pose a problem, ask students to begin the problem solution, ask students to complete the last two steps in the problem, figure out the next steps in the derivation. So basically what I do is I write a program, or I show a program on the slide which is incomplete, and I'll ask the students to complete the program, what should be the code in the last two steps. Derivation is very less in computer science, so basically reasoning and observation is what I expect from the students by showing a video or an animation. I put students in a brainstorming session to list the methods to solve a particular problem, and I put the students on debate to discuss the pros and cons of the various methods they have come up with the method I have come up with. So one of the prominent and one of the most talked about example of active learning is think, pair, and share. So basically, this is a kind of active learning strategy where students are actively engaged. Students learn from each other. Students can tackle large problems which are not so structured, and they develop the ability to consider multiple points of views. The other benefits are that you can make the class more interactive. You can increase the involvement of the students. You can increase the participation of the students, and students will realize that even others are also struggling to solve the problem. They are not alone. It builds a friendly and very academic atmosphere in the class, and a student will definitely be involved in a better teaching learning process. So, shall I continue? Because I am reaching 1 hour.
Sir, 5 minutes are left in this
Pardon, madam?
session.
Pardon, madam?
Yes, sir. I'm saying that only 5 minutes are left in this session, so we can continue in the next session if you permit, sir.
Yeah, because I have some more content. So shall I finish this think, pair, and share concept and then yeah. So so let me go ahead with this think, pair, and share concept. I'll just go with the kind of how do you implement this think, pair, and share, and let me end this session.
Okay, sir.
So what we can do as a faculty is, you can write a program to find the smallest and largest element in a given array. So you want the students to write a program to find the smallest and largest element in a given array. So what you can do is you can start the class by asking the students to write the pseudocode of the program what you expect the students to write. So pseudocode is basically very simple to write because it doesn't involve any programming language knowledge. So you can give 5 minutes of time to them. So every student will start thinking individually. He will start writing the pseudocode, and then after 5 minutes, you can stop the students and you can say to write the C++ code or C code of finding the smallest and largest element in a given array. Now, what happens here is you are asking the student first to develop a pseudocode individually, then you are asking them to pair with their neighbor, discuss with them, and devise a solution to the algorithm. Or you just ask the students to transform the algorithm into a program using a language like C or C++. Now, what happens here is that one of the person in the two may not be very much good in programming language, but the neighbor might be very good. So with these two persons collaborating, they may come up with a very good program code in C++. Then what you do as a teacher, after 10 minutes, you can stop that pairing, and then you can put your own program on the display, and then you ask the students to compare their program or their solution with your solution. And here starts the interaction and discussion among the teacher and the students, and the students and the students. And that creates an environment of active learning, and where each student will know multiple solutions of the problem. So this is the beauty of think, pair, and share. And I think many of you might be using it. So with this, I end my first session. Let me carry it ahead. What next I have in the second session. I'm very thankful to all of you for a patient listening. I hope I was able to meet up the learning objectives I had set for you. So I need to match up, my expectations with the learning that has happened with you, probably at the end of this session. So thank you so much. And any questions are there, any kind of queries are there, you are welcome, and will definitely give me some kind of satisfaction whether I was able to meet up the expectations or not.
Now, I request all the faculty members, if they have any query related to the topic, kindly put on your queries. So I'm highly thankful to you for providing us wider information about teaching learning process that will definitely help the whole teaching fraternity to further polish their teaching skills, as well as you have also taught us how to engage our students so as to make the lecture more interesting, sir. So thank you so much, sir. We would be meeting you in the next session, sir. That will start at
12 o'clock?
Yes, sir. That will start at 12.
Right, madam. Thank you so much. The privilege and pleasure was mine, and let us meet again at 12 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.